Good evening. You've reached our broadcast. This is Night Sessions, Conversations from Studio 3B. And now for my co-host, Aleister Nacht. Aleister, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Good to be here.
Excellent. Kind of a gloomy night out there tonight. Let's get into our questions. Let's talk about the New Orleans years. You've written a lot, quite a bit about that over your career as Aleister Nacht, and the New Orleans years is played prominently in your books and your podcast. Can you share with our listeners how did you get to New Orleans to begin with? How old were you, and how old were you when you got there?
Wow. I was probably 16, 17 years old, maybe 18. I'm not sure. Right in that area. My life at home was very rocky. My mother was a devout Christian, and when my father left, she kind of went overboard. And I guess it all came to a head one week. And I just basically took what I had, just the clothes on my back, and left. I didn't know where I was going. And I grew up in northern Louisiana. So I hitchhiked down to New Orleans. I thought that that might be a good place for me, a good place to maybe start over. And so that's what I did. And I ended up in New Orleans about a day later, I guess. There was a truck driver that pulled over, picked me up, and I rode in his truck all the way down to New Orleans. That's basically how I ended up there.
New Orleans has always had this kind of creepy, weird, spooky place with hoodoo and voodoo and things in the swamp. I think that mystique is a part of what attracts people to it. Is that a fair assessment? I mean, does it live up to that reputation? You've been there.
Yeah, it does. First, I'd like to say I love New Orleans and I always will. The pronunciation of it is actually New Orleans for those that are from that area. I love that area. I really do. It is my hometown, so to speak. Yeah, it's very eclectic. There are a lot of different things that are going on. It's like a group of people that are from different walks of life, different social status, but they all come together in the Big Easy just to have a good time and to enjoy it and to have fun. And so there are some things that are weird about New Orleans, but I guess as a whole, it's a wonderful place. And I delve really deeply into New Orleans on my Exalted episode for The Marsh Cult. It premieres later this month, but I go a lot deeper into my history and the history of New Orleans and the surrounding areas. I just love it. It will always be my hometown.
So, what was the absolute weirdest thing that you ever saw in New Orleans that you look back on now and you say, "Hey, that was off the charts"?
Hmm. Wow. There's quite a few of them. First, I would say the first thing to shock me, and it's very subtle, but burying people above the ground. You know, in northern Louisiana, you don't have to do that. There are cemeteries and everyone is buried underground. In New Orleans, because the city is below the water level and the water table is so shallow, you have to bury people above ground. And I think that was probably the first thing that kind of struck me is I went to one of the largest cemeteries and just walked around. And in fact, Marie Laveau is actually in that cemetery. And so I would say that was probably number one. The second thing is the underground culture that is in New Orleans, the after hours culture. And it's really not a tourist thing. It's people that are there all the time and are involved in it. And you get to know the keepers of the gate, so to speak. And it's really exciting. I remember being there one night and seeing BB King play in this little, I mean, it was no bigger than a living room, but he had done a show. I forget now where it was, maybe the lakefront arena, I'm not sure, but he had come down to the French Quarter, and there he was playing. I mean, there were so many people that came through and were exposed to that. Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue, I actually ran into him in the 80s down in the French Quarter. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's a name from the past.
yeah, it's just amazing. So I would say that's part of it. Also, the first time that I went to a voodoo ceremony, they actually killed a rooster. And I thought, what the fuck? I mean, it's like, really? Now, I didn't say that, but that was pretty shocking too. I mean, I was very sheltered when I grew up in northern Louisiana. So all of these things were really new experiences. And also I was invited to a seance, and it was weird. It really was. I don't know if it was real. I don't know if it was put on. I don't know if it was theatrical. I don't know. It was weird. I was into it. I thought, wow, that just blew my mind. So I guess those are probably the weirdest things I saw.
So you come down from northern Louisiana, your mother's driving you absolutely crazy. She's got this ultra Christian conservative persona. And you're trying to figure life out. You're a young man, you're not even technically an adult yet. And you're coming into the city, which is known for the absolute greatest things and sometimes the absolute weirdest things and sometimes the absolute most dangerous things. I mean, it's a big city, just like any big city in the US. And you're there and you're basically traveling down with a truck driver by yourself, finding your own way. And I know you've told in many stories in your podcasts and your books about your period as a heroin addict, which takes in these New Orleans years. Tell us your story about this, of your journey into this very dark place that you found yourself in. How did that happen?
That's a good question, Malthorpe. First of all, the girl I was dating was the person that had the most influence over me in my first, I guess, month and a half, maybe a little bit longer in New Orleans. She was absolutely the wildest child I had ever experienced. I just fell in love with her. I mean, absolutely. She was actually from California. I mean, I was head over heels, not in love, but she was just so cool. I just wanted to spend every minute with her. Ultimately, she was the one that shot me up the first time. And that first time, for those that that are listening and can understand this, if you have never been addicted to a substance, you'll probably quickly dismiss this. But the first time that I was shot up, she actually did it. And I actually projectile vomited initially. I mean, yeah, that sounds sexy, right? But what happened is it was the best experience that I have ever had on this earth, and would trade that for anything and anybody that I had ever cared about or admired. It was the best of both worlds. In my heart of hearts, I loved her as an individual. I respected her. I wanted to be with her. She was so fucking cool. She was everything that as a herd animal I was seeking. I guess the long and short of it is, after she shot me up, it was a bittersweet experience. And what happens is you actually experience euphoria, and it is fantastic. It is off the charts. It really is. But then it moves from euphoria to desperation, because you always want to reproduce what you have done. That first episode, that is always what you want to reproduce. You never can with addiction, but you always want to. And then ultimately that gives way to slavery for the drug. And it was something that consumed me. I mean, I have a very addictive personality. I'm a workaholic. I produce videos, I produce audio all the time. That's because I can't help it. And what happened with this first experience is I experienced something that was better than anything I had ever experienced on the face of this earth, and probably never will experience it again. That was ultimately what led me into addiction.
If I remember the story correctly, you found yourself surrounded by these really incredible New Orleans women who saw you as this broken young man who didn't have much to live for. In fact, I think you were contemplating suicide at the time, but they were into hoodoo. What was that like? And how did you come to know them to begin with?
It was a random experience. I mean, quite honestly, I was saved by the grace of this person who I met at Cafe Du Monde. And she approached me. I was actually having a cup of coffee. They have wonderful coffee. It has chicory in it. Well, I won't even get into that.
And beignets, chicory
Yeah,
coffee and beignets.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I was there and she approached me. Quite a time later, she explained why. Because I asked her, I said, look, I'm a white guy. Okay. I'm from a mixed parentage. My father was black and my mother was white. But I look white. I mean, I think, but I asked her one time, why? Why did you even talk to me? I mean, I was probably at that time maybe 90 pounds. I had long, stringy hair that I had dyed blonde. And she said that in hoodoo, aura is a very big part of the discernment of people. And she told me that my aura basically was of hopelessness, despair, and death. And she decided to talk to me because she felt that that was exactly what I was going to do. I was going to kill myself. And she was spot on. I mean, I had already planned my own suicide. You know, I'm a coward. I wasn't going to do it with a gun. I wasn't going to hurt myself, you know, like cutting my wrist or any of that. What I was going to do is I was going to overdose. And I already had it planned out. So in a lot of ways, I already had my destiny preordained at that point in time. It was going to be suicide, and it was going to be suicide by overdose. And get this, it was going to be on the steps of the St. Charles Cathedral. I thought that was just fucking symbolic that I would take my hot dose right there and they would find me and, you know, carry me away. So that was how we met. She actually, out of the goodness of her heart, and I love her so much. She's passed away, but I love her and I love her energy because she asked the question that changed my life. And it was something to the effect of, you're looking for a place to die. Had she not asked that, you probably never would have heard of Aleister Nacht.
If you're just joining us this evening, this is Malthorpe, Drako, and my co-host Aleister Nacht. We're talking to Aleister about his New Orleans years. This is Night Sessions, Conversations from Studio 3B. Aleister, so was this a group of women that were into hoodoo, or was it just one woman? How big was this group of women that swooped in to save this young man?
It was one woman, but there was a group of hoodoo practitioners. There were probably 8 practitioners. And I mean, she was the one. And I have to say, part of what she did out of the kindness of her heart, because she took a lot of shit. I looked white, and, you know, here she comes in telling this white boy where to come to meetings, and he's a fucking heroin addict. She endured a lot of shit for me. She laid her life on the altar. And while it wasn't that bad, she took a rash of shit for what she did. And the only thing I can explain that, the only way I can explain that is she was so connected with the other side. And she was such a great woman, so connected with the spiritual side that she was able to see what I was going through and actually reach out and offer a hand. I was drowning. I was going to be dead probably within a couple of weeks. And she saved me. Absolutely. She was my savior.
So Aleister, you know, it's interesting because many of us that, you know, come to this belief system or this faith, whatever you want to call it, you know, we come with a lot of different backgrounds. And just like anybody going into any, you know, order or following or group. But tell us about the shift from hoodoo to Satanism. You know, how does that happen? No one just wakes up one day and says, hey, I think I'll be a Satanist now. But the shift from hoodoo, I can see some closeness in terms of occult beliefs, but how did that happen and how did it manifest itself?
I had actually become part of their group in hoodoo, and I was learning all that I could possibly learn. Root work, the opposing forces, brick dust. I mean, all of these things were coming into play. and I was learning so much about it. But there reached a point where I was not being fulfilled spiritually. While the information was great and the pursuit of hoodoo and the working of roots and the satchel bags and all of this was fantastic, I still at the end of the day found myself empty. And so, like any journey, I continued to look for other answers. What you're exposed to the first time may not be necessarily what you are destined to do. And in my case, it wasn't. So, what I did is I started doing more exploration, more study, looking at different things and trying to find something that would fill that desperate wanting within my heart. And that's ultimately what led me to Satanism.
So was it a couple of steps, or was it 15 steps? And the other thing that's on my mind is, this is not the period that this is happening to you. This is not the age of the internet yet. How did you even get a beginning, a starting point to even learn about Satan and Satanism?
I have to say that the first book on Satanism that I read was a book from Anton LaVey, the Satanic Bible. And I had no idea anything about him. This is before the internet, but I was able to find that book in an occult bookstore down in the French Quarter. And after reading it, I thought, wow, that's pretty insightful. That's exactly what I'm drawn to, I guess. And after probably a few months, I was able to actually get some of Aleister Crowley's writings. And I thought, wow, this guy is he is an oracle in himself. He is actually a trailblazer. He is doing great things. I wish I could experience a journey like that, but I also knew what the costs were. Aleister Crowley basically gave up everything and everyone around him.
Mm.
And in a lot of ways, he subjected the people that cared about him and loved him, he subjected them to some really wild stuff. I don't think I was prepared to go that far, but I did respect what he was doing. And I thought some of his writings really, they resonated with me, even though I didn't know exactly what all of it meant. So that was really what led me away from the hoodoo and led me into, we'll call it Satanism, but quite honestly, it was devil worship and still is.
What's the distinction?
Well, I guess in popular culture, Satanism is more of a atheistic approach. It is believing in the self only. There is no higher power. There is no Satan. I guess that would probably be the easiest way to explain that part. Devil worship is believing that there is a Satanas, there is a being. He is the ruler of hell. He is the king of this earth. And I guess probably ultimately, he is the savior of those who are looking for the answer of the Antichrist.
So I guess at the end of the day, I mean, you're clearly a theistic Satanist. What would you say to those that say, EIEIO, it doesn't matter. It's just another thing. What's in your mind, What's the clear, important difference here that matters?
Well, first, I would say that they have never had a real experience with Satanas. And, I get questions all the time about why do you believe this and why do you believe that? And why are you not subscribing to the Church of Satan and atheistic approach and this, that, and the other? Once you experience the true reality of Satanas, nothing man-made and atheistic is really man-made. You can never go back. And that happened to me. It was a blessing and a curse because, quite honestly, there were so many atheists around, and they truly believed that Anton LaVey was an atheist. They would not accept any other situation, any other paradigm. And I had a very close experience with Satanas, and it showed me that there is something there. There is someone there, and they are only one dimension removed from where we're at. And being atheistic and shouting Satan is just about as empty as saying I worship a tree to me, because after my experience, the only answer is Satanas.
So it sounds like you see yourself as being chosen by Satan. I know that's a view of many theistic Satanists. Tell me about that. I mean, how did you feel that calling, and how did it manifest itself so that you sensed, hey, Satan has chosen me to be one of his?
Well, I believe there is a misconception about being chosen by Satan. Satan chooses the ones that choose him. And those that choose to be all in, they're the ones that continue the march. People are waiting, I guess. I think they have some kind of desire or thought Satan is going to swoop in and show them all the answers of the world and the other worlds far removed from our realities. And that does happen, but you have to be all in. You can't be halfway. You have to be all in. And in being all in, you have to totally dedicate yourself to what the objective is. So on the atheistic side, I think they shortchange themselves because there's a whole other world just beyond the veil that they could access, they could be a part of, and ultimately be preordained, but they dismiss it as nothing there. Being an atheist is so much easier than actually walking this walk.
Would you have chosen it just without some sort of experience happening to you?
I don't know. I really don't. I think my experience with Satanas and my view beyond the veil was something that broke me from my realist perception. I mean, I'm a realist. I call it the way it is in my perception. I don't know. I really don't.
So you're a magus, some will say priest. Yeah, how did that happen? I mean, were you involved in a coven? Is it something that you were called to do and you stepped forward and you just figured it out? Is it something you proclaimed yourself? How did that happen? And was it something you studied for?
I guess in my case, becoming a satanic priest was basically an issue of stepping forward. And I spent a lot of time with Satanas. I spent a lot of time because I really wrestled with that concept. I do not think I am a leader of people. And I get emails all the time from people around the world that tell me how I have truly affected their lives. I think that to me is almost surreal because I never really considered myself a satanic priest in the first place. But what I did is I stepped forward and I told Satanas that I would do what he wanted me to do. In the case of our coven, I was a practitioner. I was a member of Magnum Opus. And our current satanic priest, our Magus, passed away. And it left a gap. And we were looking, collectively looking, and obviously change is scary. Going through the unknown is scary, but I stayed very close to Satanas, and I was willing to step forward, not with ego, not with ulterior motives, not with any of that. I stepped forward because there was a need, and he did the rest. That's really how I ended up in it. Now, was it handed to me on a silver platter? No. I had to study. I had to write. I had to reflect. I had to spend a lot of time in the sanctum with Satanas. He revealed parts of the Gnosis that I needed in order to make this work. It was for his good, not my good. And because I was willing to do that, and because I was not, well, I won't say afraid, I was afraid because I had no reservation about stepping through that and stepping into that position. He blessed me and taught me what I needed to know to really lead the coven.
So how did the Aleister Nacht identity come about? I mean, did it just something pop in your head and you say, this is my new identity or cult identity? Or was this something given to you by the coven?
No, actually, I was a big fan of Aleister Crowley, and in looking for an occult name, as all of us do, I like the name Aleister. It was a name that really stood out with me, and obviously Aleister Crowley. The Nacht part was basically German for night. So I wanted it to have a feeling of, I guess, the Germanic, because our parental coven is in Germany. That was kind of how it all happened.
So let's shift for a minute. You know, we talked about the internet a few minutes ago, and you know, is there any value there any longer? Is there anything that you think you can do to avoid getting caught up in so much of the nonsense and the nothingness that's out there on the internet?
Yeah, Satanas provides discernment, and that's what a lot of people are missing. You know, they're sucked into a lot of situations, a lot of, I guess, social media. And Satanas, if you spend time with him and if you ask for guidance, he will provide that. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing. And I think that, yes, there is a use for the internet. It's a great tool. As I mentioned in episode 4, it's a great time to be alive because you do have so much information at your fingertips. But there is also as much misinformation out there. There's as much TikTok witches. There's as much people that are just there to attack other people. But Satanas will help you discern between those. Stay close to him. He will show you what's true.
Yeah, I think that's right. So let's shift gears just for a second and go back to the Gnosis. What would you say to the Satanist who's starting out in this 21st century? What's the best way to learn and receive the Gnosis? Not necessarily the easiest, but what's the best way?
The best way is staying close to Satanas and always looking for the things that resonate with you. You know, things that resonate with a person are actually put there for a reason. You don't pick up on subtle nuances for nothing. And you don't hear things that really give you shivers or make you really relate to that information for nothing. That in itself is Satanas. So when you hear those things, that is important for you to stop and listen and evaluate what is happening. That's the real key.
Is it always plain? Like, can you always see clearly that this is Gnosis and this is an answer, or sometimes does it take a little bit of time to manifest?
Oh, absolutely. It takes time. I have never had anything revealed to me in the Gnosis that has been absolutely easy, because that does not help us develop as people. That does not help us develop on our path. Our journey is a maze of right and wrong turns. The wrong turns are just as value added as the right turns, because you learn just as much, if not more, about what does not work or where you should not be as the things that are. So I would say that is exactly the gnosis. It's never easy. I've never found it to be easy. But any lesson that you learn, including burning your hand on the stove, is a hard lesson to learn, but it etches that lesson into your psyche, and you will not make that mistake again.
So, as you shared with us tonight, and you've written about in your books, you talk about the start of your walk into Satanism beginning in the New Orleans years as a recovering heroin addict. Looking back on your life now, Aleister, were there even earlier signs that Satan sent to you that you can now look back and say, hey, Satan has always been with me?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I really started my descent into addiction, I was at Mardi Gras one year, and I was standing on the street, and there was a lot of people there. We were watching the floats go by, and the fellow next to me collapsed. And I thought, what the fuck? Maybe he's, had too much to drink. He had been stabbed, and it was drug related. But looking back, it could have just as easily been me. I was standing next to him. What if that person with the knife would have thought, well, this is the target as opposed to this other person? And it really took me aback, and it made me think a lot about happenstance, which is something that I never really thought about before. Why do things happen, and why do they happen a specific way? And I mean, that was just one example. Another example, I was actually walking down Esplanade Boulevard, and there was a truck, a 18-wheeler that was hauling I don't know exactly what it was on the back of it, some kind of a small tractor or something. And as it came over, it actually struck the guardrail of a bridge that I was about to walk across. And that vehicle came off of the back of that truck and went right over my head. I mean, it gives me chills. Just I can see it so clearly. Went right over my head and landed, I mean, not 10 or 15 feet behind me, and was absolutely destroyed. That was another thing that I look back on, and at the time I was thinking, wow, I mean, these things are starting to add up. I'm beginning to see some patterns. Those were very clear things that I saw that could have ended my life, but it felt like there was something else. There was something important that I needed to do, and I had no idea what it was. Quite honestly, I dismissed it as being something that was just my ego. I'm me, so I'm so important. There's going to be something important that I do. I'm sure that the other however billion people are on the face of this earth think the same way. But for me, those were clear illustrations that I could have just as easily been decapitated. I mean, the thing came right over my head. I could have just as easily been killed by mistake down in the French Quarter. I could have just as easily been stabbed, but I wasn't. I think that was maybe an indication that there is something for me in life.
Yeah, and I think you can see it a lot more in other examples you've come up with tonight. For instance, the hoodoo woman coming to you and confronting you about your life, the fact you didn't drug overdose, the fact that you got into a truck cab and survived that. It looks like there's a lot of examples like that going on in your life.
Yeah, life is a journey, and no one said it's easy. And there's no one there to spoon feed you. You know, I get questions all the time. Oh, tell me how to summon a demon. Tell me how to do this. I just want to know. I had an interesting comment on one of my audio books. I just wanted to know how to summon a demon. Well, what the fuck would you do with it after you summoned it? You clearly are not prepared for it. So it's one of those things where you have to look at the reality of the situation. I will say that Satanas will never give you more than you're ready to have. And that can be a very hard learning process. It can be very uncomfortable. I can tell you everything that I know about Satanas, and it will not do you any good because it's my path. You've got your path, and it may not fit with your path.
You brought the question up based on someone wanting to summon a demon. We get hit all the time with these questions about ritual killings and burnings and abuse of children and abuse of animals, so on and so forth, which that is so far away from the practice as you know it. What would you say to the listeners tonight who think that's the definition of what Satanism is?
I'd say they're very confused, very misguided. Wherever they're getting their information is absolutely the wrong source. There are a lot of cults out there that do this. I mean, that's what my episode 4 of the Exalted is about. There are so many groups out there that do this. I mean, they do animal sacrifice. They even do human sacrifice. It's nothing I've ever witnessed, but in your heart of hearts, when you hear certain stories, like one of the stories I illustrate is a 12-year-old girl from Belle Chase, Louisiana, that was walking home from school, and she was abducted, and she ended up, as rumor has it, at what they call a soiree. It's not devil worship. It's not the Satanism that I subscribe to. It never has and it never will. In fact, sacrificing any living thing is contrary to Satanas. You sacrifice what means something to you is something that you really could not live without. That's a sacrifice. Like the money in your wallet, the security that you have, the things that really mean something to you, that is a sacrifice. Not going out and killing some poor animal or some innocent human has nothing to do with it.
So, Aleister, this has been really great. Let's go ahead and go to our closing question. What's the greatest lesson here that you want our listeners to take home? Some Gnosis to leave our listeners with from your New Orleans years.
Probably the most important part is the relationship with Satanas. If you do not have a relationship with Satanas, whatever you're doing is bullshit. I mean, that is the reality of it. If it does not come from Satanas, it is shit. You've created it, maybe in your mind, maybe in your psyche, maybe your friends, maybe the people that you call coven members have created something, but it does not mean anything without Satanas. And if you are not spending time in your sanctum with him, then you're basically wasting time. You're wasting energy. And in a lot of ways, you're wasting other people's time and energy as well.
Aleister, thanks so much. For my co-host, this is Malthorpe Drako. Listeners, that's a wrap for this month from Night Sessions, Conversations from Studio 3B. Tune into our broadcast in February. Watch for the announcements. Aleister, darkest dreams.
And satanic blessings to you and our listeners.
King of the world, amongst the profane, ruler of the world, in the midst of the vain, deceiver of the world, among the viled, lord of the earth, amidst the defiled, father of lies, veil of an insidious snare, obscene ruler of the authority of the air, ancient serpent from the bottomless pit, antinomian desecrator of the holy writ, son of the morning, apostate of schismatics, father of night, crowned upon the heretics. O hell, where dissenters bear the light, where the infernal gaze upon thy sight. Ave Satanas, Ave Satanas, Ave Satanas.